Hey, in our podcast today, we're going to talk about what Alexis de Tocqueville said was the strength of America, and you're not going to believe it. He said our women are better than any women in the world. Why are they better? What makes them so strong? What makes America and family and marriage so strong? And what are the economic impacts of when we get our marriages and families centered in a biblical view? We're going to talk about that in our podcast today.
Hey, welcome to the Ron Johnson Discipleship Podcast.
This is our daily, or actually weekly, attempt to rescue the world from insanity and chaos. And boy, we have a great topic to talk about today. It's amazing how the biblical worldview, I used to say this all the time when we were teaching young people, the biblical worldview is the truest, most accurate, most vivid picture of ultimate reality and leads to the greatest blessed life. And this book is just helping us to kind of get our brains around that as we talk about all the different aspects of really what makes America exceptional. And it's not about gender, race, ideology, any of those kinds of things. Like Americans are superior. It really is about worldview.
Yeah, and again, once again, we take the idea of a nuclear family for granted. We take monogamy for granted, and what this book and this chapter particularly is connect us from monogamy, okay, for like a strong nuclear family to economic prosperity, right?
Right. What led America to its resurgence or surging to the top of the heap, so to speak? In fact, this chapter is called Family. Why did America surge ahead of Europe? And we sit here every week, go, wow, because it's so eye-opening to us as he kind of comes from a different culture, and it helps us to see things maybe we as Americans have taken for granted, just because it's the way things are. Right. So here's a good lead. He begins by quoting a great book, a long book, a 2-volume classic called Democracy in America by Alexis de Tocqueville. De Tocqueville wrote this book 4 decades after the bloody French Revolution. He was in America. He was kind of looking at the postpartum. Of course, the French had gone through a bloodbath, and it was a disaster. America had just the opposite effect. America was prospering, becoming a superpower, an economic superpower. And this is what he said, and I was shocked by this. He said, "I have recorded so many considerable achievements of the Americans. If anyone asks me what I think the chief cause of the extraordinary prosperity and growing power of this nation, I should answer that it is due to the superiority of their," if you had to do a fill in the blank, the superiority of their, I would not have got this answer right.
No, I would think about the military might or economic prowess or ingenuity. No,
strength
it's not.
Of their men.
Right, no.
But he said the superiority of their women.
Wow, that's amazing, yeah.
Now, let's talk a little bit about that. What was his, I mean, what was so unique about American women? How were American women different from French women? I mean, women are women, aren't they? What's the difference?
Well, first you got to consider the superiority of 50% of your population will make a difference in economic prosperity, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Will make a difference in the strength of your nation, right? If half your population is diminished or minimalized or marginalized,
right,
you're going to be struggling economically. You want a nation to be strong, you want 50% of your population to be innovative, strong, growing.
Sure. So if you somehow put a cap or you limit the ability for women to be free, to explore their creativity, to use their gifting, then you're putting a lid on it, like you said, half your population.
Absolutely.
So he goes on to say this. He said, in almost all Protestant nations, girls are much more in control of their own behavior than among Catholic ones. The independence is even greater in those Protestant countries, such as England, which have kept or gained the right of self-government. He says, in such cases, both political habits and religious beliefs infuse a spirit of liberty into the family. In the United States, Protestant teaching is combined with a very free constitution and a very democratic society, and in no other country is a girl left so soon or so completely to look after herself. Now, this is, we could almost interpret that as neglect, like Americans don't care about their daughters, but just the opposite. He said because of the infusion of the Constitution and laws that create an even playing field and actually punish wicked behaviors such as rape or adultery or some of these other things.
Divorce,
Women were ennobled and had an opportunity to experience more freedom in their lives than in Europe, which was largely Catholic, or then we can go overseas into Islamic countries or Asian countries that have completely different worldviews, like the Hindus that she talks about. And so he went on to say, certainly of all countries in the world, America is one in which the marriage tie is most respected, and where the highest and truest conception of conjugal happiness has been conceived. So basically, he said it was the Americans' view of marriage, which was biblical, and correspondingly their high view of women, which enabled the American family to be so strong and healthy, and which led to economic prosperity and blessing.
And what a great insight, right? So to connect the dot, biblical worldview on marriage and family, on the unity, the covenantal, healthy marriage, monogamous marriage, led to a prosperous family, nuclear family, that led to prosperity of a nation. And that's basically what he connected the dots that way. Right?
And he could look at what's happening in Europe, where most men were not getting married, most men were living in illicit sex, where women were being used, where women were subjugated, where women did
marry, but the men had mistress, or they have affairs, or they just divorced their wife because they got sick of them, or whatever there is.
Right, or the wife was mistreated and not cherished or loved or valued. So this whole idea of a biblical view of womanhood and a biblical view of marriage and family, as you said, monogamous, which as he points out, that idea was a Christian idea. It wasn't even a Jewish idea, because we read through the Old Testament, and even though God revealed himself and in Genesis, Adam and Eve and leave and cleave and all that, I mean, the principles for monogamy are there, but it wasn't practiced by the Jews. But it was the Christians who really took God's word seriously in that regard and implemented a monogamous marriage, one man, one woman in covenant for life.
Right. I mean, right now in the world today, monogamy is pretty standard throughout laws and traditions and what's seen as good. But again, that's not the norm. If you look at the history of the world, polygamy is the norm, right? Throughout all cultures, right? And again, connect the dots. What does polygamy do to the nuclear family and how that affects the society at large? It's destructive, right? And that's why most nations, after they've seen the light in which Protestant has brought monogamy into the greater discussion, they're like, oh, we can't go back from monogamy. Don't get me wrong, sin has a ways of creeping in, and maybe it'll come back one day. But everyone can see how powerful monogamy is from the objective levels in strengthening a society.
Well, I love, because he's Indian, right? So he says as late as the 1990s, there was an Indian politician who had 49 wives.
Wow.
Now, how do you have 49? I'm sure we're having a growing number of grandkids in my household, and I'm just trying to make sure I keep up with all their names. Like, how do you keep up with 49 wives?
Well, you don't.
Well, that's just it. It's very
you neglect them.
Yeah.
So again, the nuclear family is so destructive. So you got a bunch of fatherless kids, and you got a bunch of wives who are unhappy because they're not being loved well, and then it just cascades on and on generationally.
Well, like you say, you got 49 wives. If each of your 49 wives have 49 kids, I mean, overall,
or just one kid.
That's what I'm saying, just one kid.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you even know who your kids are, let alone your grandkids? I mean, it destroys any kind of intimacy in the family.
Absolutely.
And that could create all kinds of problems. I think if we could go through the Bible, we could see David and others had great problems because of they were really neglectful parents.
I mean, look at the problem with Joseph, his brother, stepbrothers. Look at, I mean, on and on. You know, Jacob. I mean, Isaac and Ishmael. I mean, on and on. Polygamy is not good news throughout the Bible and in reality, okay?
Absolutely. So this was good. We cracked up about this. So, and I've been to India before. You know, it is a very much gender segregated kind of culture even today, even in the churches. And I'm always amazed. Here's on the left side, here sits all the men. On the right side, here sits all the women. And I would ask, you know, our contacts, like, how come you don't sit by your wife? It was just hard for me to understand. And they make the comment in here that they called Westerners immoral. And he said, well, why are we immoral? And he said, well, because you walk in public and you hold hands with your wife. That's immoral. It's because you drive your sister-in-law to the grocery store and she sits on the back of your scooter. It's because you don't have your women's faces veiled. You're immoral. Mm-hmm. And his brother, the author's brother, takes these guys to challenge, to task. And He said this. He says, "You don't allow your wives to uncover their faces in front of your fathers and brothers because you trust neither your father nor your brothers nor your wives." He said, "You chain your wives to your kitchens and imprison them behind their veils because you are immoral." And he said, when his brothers said that, he goes, they all said, "It's right. It's true."
Yeah, everyone agreed.
So the reason you hide your wife in a kitchen is not because she's supposed to live in a kitchen the rest of her life and have no other life outside the kitchen. The reason you hide her behind a veil is because you don't want the other men in your culture who are perverts just like you to take your wife or to abuse your wife or to mistreat your wife. And so you hide her, you cover her, and you call that morality. But it's not morality at all. It's really a veil of your immoral culture because of the way you view women and mistreat women. And they had no response for that other than, "You're right." Yeah. So it's interesting how the perception is this is traditional morality. But in reality, it was slavery. And it was a mistreatment of women and a shielding and hiding of women. I thought, wow, that was incredible.
It reminds me of when the Pharisees accused Jesus of not following the law. And Jesus pointed out, what is the spirit behind these laws? Okay, I'm obviously a woman dressing very provocatively, drawing attention to herself. That's over the line, right?
Right.
But the heart behind all of this is like, do you trust your wife? And do you trust your brothers?
Yeah.
And do you trust that? Is there a basic level of trust so that we're not producing all these procedures to create morality, but really is to protect your lack of impulse control, your lack of to restrain your immorality, right? So seeing through the veil into the truth. Right?
Exactly. All that appears to the eyes is not true or real. You know. And again, we've been raised in our culture has its own problems. I'm not picking on any culture, but the times that I've been to India and I've worked with national leaders over there, you know, I am walking with my wife. I'm holding her hand. She's by my side. I'm opening the car door for her, things like that. And my heart grieves because I watch a national leader who's walking and his wife is literally 10 yards behind him. Mm-hmm. And she's trying to keep up and he's oblivious to her needs. Obviously, she's not feeling cherished. Obviously, she's not feeling honored. But it is a cultural veil because that's not how they were raised, and that's not how they've implemented, I guess, biblical principles. Whereas that's a culture we grew up in. Honoring your wife, open the door for her, have her by your side, not behind her, treat her with respect, introduce her. You know, sometimes again, there's no even introductions because it's just that's just my wife. Right. It is a cultural blind spot. That keeps their marriages not so great and certainly doesn't honor women in public or esteem women in public.
Well, I just think so even last night, my wife and I, we got a whiteboard and we charted out our vision and our goals for the rest of 2023.
I love that about you, by the way. I know Matthew can say amen to this and anybody on our team.
Yeah.
This is the whiteboard man, and magic happens when you have a whiteboard.
Right, a whiteboard is my favorite secret weapon.
You're even implementing the whiteboard at your house.
No, I'm trying to do.
I love it.
I'm trying to do it with my wife.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I find that to be very fun.
Yeah, I enjoy it because really, you know, when you have a bird's eye view, you can't win the war unless you see the strategy. You see the war field, right? Yeah. And not that I'm fighting a literal battle right now, but you know what I was doing is I was trying to cultivate the dreams and gifts of my wife.
But you included her.
Oh, she's alone. So we made some goals for our family, for our kids, and then we did goals for myself and for her. But the most fun part for me was her. Because we took that time and energy and we focused like what's really on your heart for 2023. We're not talking about forever, just rest of this year. What is your dream? What's your vision? Because as her husband, one of my greatest assignment is to cultivate her biggest dreams and her goals so that she can reach her fulfillment.
Time out, because you're throwing out some great stuff right here, but I just want to put it in context. Like that view is distinctly Christian.
Absolutely
Christian. He talks in the book about Rousseau, who was, you know, the French philosopher.
Yeah, the Enlightenment founder,
his view of women were unfinished men.
Yep.
The Hindu view of women is that your karma sucks.
Yeah.
And so you come back and you get to be a woman and you get to be a slave for men.
Work hard. Next incarnation, you might be a man.
Reincarnation. So, you look, it's funny to me. It's really sad how liberals in America and feminists have attacked the Bible as it somehow suppresses women or mistreats women, when it's really the Christian idea of women made in the image and likeness of God, co-equal with a man. And then Pentecost comes, right? I'm going to pour out my spirit on all flesh, men and women. So, the Bible, and Jesus in particularly, raises the view of women. Yeah. And what you're talking about here is a Christian view of marriage. You as the Christ figure, serving your wife, developing your wife, honoring your wife, dreaming with your wife, right by your side. This is not just, the American dream or something. This is uniquely Christian, and when you practice it like this, it brings unity, it brings strength in your relationship, it extends to your children. Right. And here you're saying, how do I develop what you mentioned at the start of this podcast? How do I develop the other 50% of our population?
Absolutely.
And even as it relates to the church, what are we doing to develop women and the gifts that are in women to be used for the glory of God instead of suppressing it? So anyway, how did this all end? I'm excited.
No, it's great because she was trying to figure out what's really on my heart, and I get to pepper her questions and say, hey, what is your dream? Do you want to take some voice lessons? Do you want to do some of these other things? You want to cultivate whatever it is we end up talking about. But the point is that was fun. And that was very vision driven. And I was going to say that how I got the idea came from the Bible. Christ loved your wife like Christ loved the church. And what did Christ did? He didn't just give his life for us. He did that, but he came to cultivate us. He wanted to bring out the best in who we are so we can be most like him. So reading that, my direct interpretation is one of my greatest call in my life is that my wife fulfill her greatest potential. She's there to say, hey, Andrew, I'm going to help you fulfill your greatest potential. I'm like, how you want to help me, how I can fulfill my greatest potential is help you fulfill your greatest potential. Well, and it goes back and forth, back and forth.
And in marriage class, we talk about the crazy cycle, but the crazy cycle could actually work for good. Crazy cycle for bad is I'm worried about my needs and I want my wife to meet my needs and what about me and me and me and me and me? And then in the process, she's going, well, what about me? And it just gets to be this downward cycle of narcissistic mess.
I've been there before.
Yeah. Well, we all have.
Yeah.
We all have.
Yeah.
But it's a beautiful thing when you say, wait a minute, let me focus as the Christ figure in this marriage. Let me focus on how I can minister to my wife. Honey, what are your dreams? What's in your heart? What would you like to do? And when you're doing that, she's like, oh, no. What would you like to do?
Yeah.
It's this beautiful cycle of service.
It energizes me because it's giving me a purpose and a vision, which I'm telling you, for the husbands out there, you might not even feel this or know this. Your greatest call, your greatest fulfillment is to lay your life down. Guaranteed for a worthy cause, not for some stupid cause, for a worthy cause, for your wife and your kids, for your culture, for your kingdom of God, for the church, for your nation. But start by laying your life down for your family, right?
Yes.
That you will feel so fulfilled, so energized when you start to do that. So, anyways, so I'm just saying, but that view came directly from reading the Bible.
Right.
It came from nowhere else. It's not like Andrew had just a great idea because I'm a great guy. Nope. It came strictly from what Paul says about the purpose of husband and marriage.
So we could highlight all these different world religions, and obviously we talked about Hinduism, but I love the author because he also, in a humorous way, it's only humorous because it's so ridiculous, but he highlights Muhammad, the prophet, and Islam. And he tells a story, and this is all, you can read all of this. This is historical. This is not somebody's commentary. But the prophet goes to his adopted son's home to see his adopted son, and his wife opens the door. And when he sees his wife, he starts lusting after her beauty. And he won't even come into the house because he's so, as we would say, he's aroused, all right? Mm-hmm. And his adopted son, who is obviously, worshiping him and adoring him, says, "Look, if you want my wife, I'll divorce her, and you can take her on as your wife." Well, he says we can't do that because that would be incest, and then I would be violating the law, right? Mm-hmm. And so Muhammad goes and seeks God about the situation and gets in a trance, and surprisingly, God gives him a new law.
New revelation.
A new revelation that is put into the Quran that he can actually marry a family member, and for him, it's not incest. And it's funny because this adopted son's wife says, "Wow, how quickly the gods speak to you." You know,
No, it's his own wife. His
was that his own wife?
His own wife, because he's got other wives already, right?
Yeah, so she's like, "Wow, that's amazing how fast the Lord gives you fresh revelation to confirm your own perverted lusts and desires." Now we know Muhammad was a man like the rest of us. He's a sinner. There's not a human being, at least a man on planet Earth, that does not, at some point in life, deal with lust or covetousness or ungodly desires. And so Muhammad is just like the rest of us. But it's amazing how religion is used as a cover-up to, basically justify the perverted desires of men. And that is what religion is. It's man-made ways to please God.
But in that scenario, okay, let's talk about the value of women. Okay, let's talk about the value of Aisha, I think it's Muhammad's wife, how she felt when he's like, "Oh, I'm going to marry someone else." Let's talk about the value of this lady he ended up marrying, and how she got quickly divorced by his adopted son.
For sex.
Because he found her attractive. Again, how it values women. Now, contrast that with biblical understanding of sexuality and marriage, which says, "Do not covet your neighbor's wife." And then Jesus says, if you lust after a woman, the same thing as coveting.
So let's go back even to Roman times. It's amazing how sex is used as a means for worship.
Yep.
So we have, even in the Bible days, we have temple prostitutes everywhere, male and female.
Yep.
So homosexual sex, prostitute sex, whatever, male and female. In fact, even in Roman times, this was interesting. The author points out that the reason adultery was punished so strongly was not because it was sexually immoral, but because your wife was viewed as property.
Yeah.
So if you sleep with another man's wife, you're actually taking his property. So it wasn't that there was anything wrong with having sex with another person that wasn't your wife. It was if you had sex with someone else's wife, you were taking what belonged to him.
Right.
It had no concern at all for the woman.
Right.
And so he makes the point that some Roman women would actually volunteer to have their name on the temple prostitute roll so that they could commit adultery and not be punished for it. I mean, it's so perverted.
Right.
But we see this, when you go over to India, there's famous temples, and he alludes to them, famous temples that were basically shrines for sex. Right. All the artwork was sexual, but it was a form of worship.
Right.
And there was nothing the matter with it. It was a way of cleansing your soul in the Hindu understanding.
And there's a myth going on like sexual liberation liberates women. No, if you study history over and over again, sexual liberation imprisons women. It does not liberate, it does not elevate.
So let's talk
women.
about why. Why was homosexuality, for instance, so huge in the Roman culture and in most decadent cultures? If a man can be satisfied sexually without committing to a woman, then what incentive does he have to marry anyone or to have children or to settle down and have a home? If he can make money and pursue his dreams and have sex, whether it's with a woman or with another man, why deal with the hassles of marriage?
Right.
Yeah, because, two fallen people trying to be committed, raise kids, work on their marriage.
Tough.
I mean, this is not easy. So why even bother with it? And in fact, there's quotes in his book about ancient philosophers who basically said, women are tough creatures to be married to. Because you're a selfish man and she's a selfish woman and you're going to have to work it out, and only Jesus makes it really work. So you can see cultures where, even in American culture today, I feel really, really badly for especially Christian young women who are single, because men today, and let's just say that even whether it's not sleeping with a real woman, a man could engage in a fantasy level with a woman through all kinds of porn on his phone. He doesn't even have to engage in a woman. Right. He can engage in a woman in a fantasy world vicariously. Yep. So you got all these men now who have been almost neutered. Either their sexual drive is gone because they've exploited it through porn, or they have no desire to get married because of the challenges of real relationships with a real member of the opposite sex. And so you got women that are, looking around trying to find a marriageable man to settle down with, and you got men that refuse to grow up or just say, you know what, I'm just going to make a lot of money and have sex casually.
Right.
Or I'm going to cohabitate, try it out. A lot of people are doing that, and that ends, of course, in total tragedy and disaster, because it's really not like marriage at all. So you can just see where women are losers, men are losers, and ultimately children are losers, and your culture loses.
Right.
I mean, you produce a weak nation. And so, again, the proof is in the pudding. You talked about biblical truth. How about the Ten Commandments? You shall not covet, including your neighbor's wife.
Yeah.
So you're not allowed to look at your neighbor's wife and go, wow, I wish she were my wife, or I wish I could sleep with her. Let's talk a little bit, too, about the whole thing of childhood brides. You see this in the Islamic world. You see it in the Hindu world. You saw it in the Roman culture, where he points out that it was not unusual for girls who had not even reached the age of adulthood in terms of menstruation. Girls under the age of 10. In fact, Muhammad's wife, he married one of his wives at the age of 6. I mean, what a sick, perverted thing to practice, and yet it was practiced over much of the world. You see it in a lot of Islamic countries today, where men are taking child brides, who, again, these are like elementary school girls, and bringing them in, so they're practicing polygamy and childhood marriage. And again, what was the turnaround in changing these laws? It was Christianity, it was the Bible. We're saying no young girl should be brought into marriage as a sexual partner when she's got no choice, she hasn't matured, and she's basically being brought in for one reason alone. That's to be a sexual object. So all this whole pedophilia and everything that's going on in our culture today and in the world today, it all stems from this perverted drive in men that the Bible came along and changed. So raising the age of marriage. Let's talk a little bit about Luther. That was amazing. So you have Catholicism that adopted really a kind of a Platonic view.
So you went from polygamy to like
celibacy.
The highest level of spirituality and devotion, celibacy.
Right. And
so
just to add,
the pendulum.
So there is a place, a noble place for celibacy. There are some people who are called to that, and it is a gift. And the whole idea behind it is they're going to give themselves fully to the Lord and to the ministry. But to suggest that to be a priest or to be a spiritual leader,
everybody has to call. Everyone should aspire for that. When you don't have the gift, for example, it causes a lot of immorality in the church, because people can't handle it.
And we saw that up to this day, all the sex abuse scandals that are happening, especially in the Catholic Church, and all throughout history, where you had priests that were immoral. Priests that were fathering illegitimate kids, priests that were engaged in homosexuality because there were no women around, right? And you had to go find the women. And so you have a massive homosexual problem among priests. All of this because of a distorted, perverted view of what holiness
and the proper place of sex, right? That sex is now, women are diminished further because seen as seductress and sex is bad.
Women were viewed as evil because they were the temptresses, right? And again, this is a male projecting his wicked heart onto a female, and then blaming her for why he's lusting. And again, it's totally warped and perverted. But he makes the author makes the point that Luther obviously had a massive impact in the Reformation, but it was not his critique of selling indulgences as much as it was his critique of the priesthood. And he said that God created marriage, and that marriage was the norm for most people. In other words, most people are called to find their partner and to live in a monogamous relationship, covenant relationship, leave, cleave, become one flesh, express your sexual desires, which are godly and good and pure, and the means by which God, created for those desires to be expressed, which was marriage.
Yeah, he discovered the point that marriage was created before the fall.
Right.
So it was considered good. Eve was good. Marriage was good.
You're right.
I love he said here, the family, not the monastery, was the divinely ordained school of character.
So let's talk about that.
You and I can both appeal to that. I mean, first, I think it's for me. I mean, if we're for marriage, I or having kids, and how much have I been changed? And if you've been married and you have kids, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, your character molded and shaped. And this is a school that won't leave you, right? 3 o'clock in the morning, your baby's up crying. Who's going to get the baby? You are. You know, you don't get to be like, well, you know what? I'm going to just quit being a dad for a second. No, you don't get that, right?
So yeah, this is radical. He's basically saying, if you really want to be spiritual, anybody could run off and hide in a monastery.
Right.
And spend all day long, you know, in worship and prayer and Bible reading, apart from any other human being. If you really want to know what you're made of, get married to another person. You're selfish. They're selfish. You're broken. They're broken.
And then have a bunch of selfish babies who are just high needs on everything because they're babies, right?
Right.
And then see how you turn out.
If you want to see like who glows in the dark, who's the most spiritual, why don't you determine who is the first to hear the crying child at 3 o'clock in the morning that you're going to get up and tend to their needs? That's how you really determine who's spiritual. Or when you're having a disagreement, who chooses the low road? Who chooses to serve, who chooses to forgive. This is true spirituality, and Luther nailed it. He said, man, if you want to really be holy and you want to really be like Jesus, get married.
Yeah.
Now, again, we're focusing on the struggles of marriage, but as you learn to die and as you let the covenant sharpen you and polish you and change you, that's when marriage becomes sweet and really beautiful.
Well, again, go back to what Paul said of marriage, like Christ lays light down for the church. Now, could Christ want to go on the cross? No, but for the joy set before him, right? The joy comes after the death, right? Same thing for marriage. I mean, after fighting through all these different issues, there is great joy in marriage, and there's great joy in being a dad for me, and great joy for my wife, for being a mom. But you have to go through paths of death. And I'll be honest, as a young man, I have no idea what that means until I got married.
Nobody does.
You can act like you do. You can watch YouTube video. You can go to marriage class and listen to everyone else talk about it. Until you go through the school yourself, you have no clue.
Isn't it funny? Most marriageable guys say, 18 to their 20s, they think that their wife is really, really impressed with their six-pack. I mean, they're working on their six-pack, and their wife's like, I could care less how many ripples you have in your stomach. Take out the freaking garbage.
How about you listen to me, share my heart. Focus and listen.
Your kid needs his diaper change, get away from the mirror and go be a dad. I mean, it's just amazing the reality check that happens when you step into the covenant of marriage.
Right. And Luther discovered this, and he's like, wait. We are elevating something that's causing a lot of immorality, and it's causing a lot of decay in our society because of we're not valuing marriage and family. And he wrote a bunch of books that people want to kill him for. But it started changing culture, it started changing economics, it started changing society because he was emptying the monasteries. Because people are leaving being a monk or a priest to go get married.
Well, he called this notion of forced celibacy for the priests the devil's trap, and it certainly was. Because again, I mean, when you're saying that you have to deny a basic God-given desire that God has placed in men and in women for family, for covenant, for marriage, you're setting yourself up for horrible temptations. Now, listen, and the time that we have left, we only got a few minutes, he talked about the American girl, and he said America's strict morals regarding sexuality actually created strong women. Back in the colonial days, and goes back to the Bible, like if you committed rape, that was the death penalty. You were murdered. Your life was taken.
Executed,
If you committed adultery, your life could be taken because you were destroying a marriage and a family. I mean, these are pretty strong. Premarital sex, you received a fine or public whipping, or you were given an order to marry. Like you had sex with this girl, not marry her. That created some mega walls of protection around sex and around women who were the victims of the perverted strength of men used to take advantage of them. And what it did too, and then you push the marriageable age higher, so you allow women a chance to mature.
Right.
And then you empower women because you say, look, you don't have to be married. If you want to stay single and pursue your dreams, do it. But if you want to be married, you don't have to be forced into marrying that person. You could actually explore whether you were willing to commit yourself to that man for the rest of your life, which meant that women were empowered with a choice, with their eyes wide open as to whether or not they wanted to enter into that covenant. They were not forced by a dad or by a mom. They were not given into marriage as a young girl with no choice whatsoever. It was really an empowering thing where they willingly chose. And so even in our wedding ceremonies, do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to love and cherish till death do you part? And she's not there going, well, I have to because my dad's forcing me. No, she is willingly giving herself to that man. And that man is willingly giving himself to her. Right. I mean, it's a powerful moment, but we take it for granted. In a lot of countries, it's a deal between dads and dowries and money and family and alliances, and there's zero act of volition or choice on the woman's part, and it's done for every reason other than love and marriage.
And what's happening now? That's the American woman, American girl back a while ago.
Right.
Now the modern feminist movement, what it's done is you hyper inflate like the feminist movement and the cause, and what you do is you beat down men. And what you have is you're not getting the results you want because you don't get masculine, strong, gentle, humble men. You get men who wants nothing to do with these women. Right. So again, going back to monogamy, these men don't want to marry these feminist women.
No.
Who's going to diminish them? So the marriage rate decreases once again.
And he brings up a good point.
Yeah.
The fact that we're created in the image and likeness of God and there's equality does not remove authority. Yeah. The whole reason for authority and structure in the Christian home is because there's two people who are broken and fallen, and both need the Lord, and both need grace, and both need help. But God says, husband, you're going to lead your wife, and I want you to lead her, though, not in domination, but I want you to lead her, as you've pointed out, I want you to lead her like Jesus.
Well, the Bible defines leadership as washing people's feet, washing their feet. So God takes that into account. Serve them, yeah.
And I love what you brought out, that Christ laid down his life for his bride, for her betterment, to wash her and cleanse her, and he's coming back for a bride that's without spot or blemish. So it's not that we're looking at our wives as all spotted and full of blemishes, but what we are doing is our love should cause our wives to come to life. And I appreciate what you shared, that we're concerned about what is the dream God's put in your heart? What is the gifts God's put in you? How is our life together to be expressed so that both of us, man and woman, husband and wife, both of us reach our full potential in Christ? And so it doesn't negate, there's nothing unhealthy about the fact that someone is called to lead your home. That's what the Bible teaches, and men, that's what God's called us to do, lead our home. But how we lead our home is really, really critical, and Jesus is the gold standard for that.
And I think, again, in the debate right now, what does empowering and valuing women really look like? The radical feminist has a certain perspective and view. And again, our argument is, again, from the Bible's perspective, there's this beautiful balance of loving your wife but respecting your husband. That actually leads to the best empowerment, the greatest way to value our women, and really defined by the American experiment. As we move away from that, either we're no longer defining what does it mean to be a woman, or we're giving to this radical feminism that we just create these very depowered men or men who have lost their ability of respect. None of that works.
Right.
This beautiful balance that the Bible is given is the best formula for us to truly value our women well.
And not only our women, but how about the best environment for raising children, for passing on our values. And I like what he talked about on the economic side of things, and this is proven over and over again. When a man commits to a woman, and they stay together in marriage, and they have children, and they raise their children in that home, what it does is it teaches a man about integrity and trust. My word is my bond.
Yep.
I committed to my wife. I said I do. I said I will love you and cherish you. We made a covenant. Now will I be a man of my word? Yep. And because I'm a man of my word in my home, I can be a man of my word in the marketplace.
Yep.
And you can trust what I have to say. This leads to economic stability because I talked about in the morality chapter, if there's no sense of trust in the marketplace, there's no business environment. There's corruption. That's what's happening in America right now. We can't trust anybody or any institution because of the corruption and the lying. So when a man keeps the promise that he made to his wife and keeps the promise that he made to his children and keeps promises in every arena of his life, it creates a high degree of trust, which literally is the currency for economic development.
Well, how about this? I care about my kids. I care about their kids. I am not going to create some crazy debt that I never have to pay. I'm planting a tree, not for myself, but for the future generations. Yep. That leads to a culture, society of economic prosperity from this idea of generational kids, wife, family.
And who would have thought that economic prosperity in a nation could be traced back to the strength and dignity of women?
Yeah,
that's
marriage,
what de Tocqueville noticed. American women are superior, and as he fleshed out why, he saw the importance again of a biblical and Christian understanding of marriage and family. So, praise the Lord for that. That's what we get to enjoy. If you wonder why we're so blessed, we're helping to tell you why we're so blessed. And to the degree that marriage is weak in America, we'll see weakness in our children and weakness in our economy and weakness in our churches and weakness all across the board. So let's be committed to strong marriages. That's what we are here at Living Stones, strong marriages. Marriage class, 4 o'clock. Pastor Jerry and Terry would be so happy for me right now. In fact, you all need to know this. We minister to marriages every single week here at Living Stones. So come, work on your marriage, strengthen your marriage, focus on your marriage. It's worth it. It's not only a blessing to you, it's a blessing for all of us as Americans. All right. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next Thursday.